articles have been posting that Allie Chapman is speaking out, basically calling out Disney for what she said was basically a huge missed opportunity to properly represent little people or dwarves from their community in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. She said, "This is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's a movie that's supposed to have real dwarves. Instead, Disney chose to use CGI to replace actors and actresses that are little people that are very talented." She continued by saying that Disney had the great opportunity to cast very talented actors like ourselves, referring to herself and her husband, Matt McCarthy, who also has dwarfism, and says that they missed the boat. Her husband had also said there are a lot of little people actors out there that would love to have a part in this kind of movie. And I guess my question, or the question should be, should we be so inclusive that we become exclusive? Should we try so hard not to offend anyone, especially dwarves who barely get roles in Hollywood to begin with, that we just, barely ever cast them in roles again? Because now that we have CGI, Hollywood is probably thinking, oh, those silly dwarves, they're obsolete. But then what happened to all the big talk about representation? There's no greater iconic role for dwarves to play than in one of Disney's most well-known stories, Snow White, that features a whole entire team of 7 whole freaking dwarves, where they play actual heroes, hardworking people, and a lovable cast of characters. But I find it so interesting how they're trying to pretend that Peter Dinklage didn't just drag the ladder up out of the proverbial reach of all his fellow dwarves, who, unlike him, are not too proud enough to have any problem with taking this kind of job that 7 of them could have used. Or for crying out loud, even voicing the freaking characters.
Because right now there's more dwarves on this podcast than there are in the new Snow White movie. And that's probably due to Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, Peter Dinklage was once a breakthrough actor for little people, but now he's being slammed by them because he's being blamed for Wicked. 2021, Peter Dinklage came out slamming Disney for hiring Latina actress Rachel Zegler to play Snow White. The reason being he viewed her casting as nothing more than a woke band-aid from Disney. That's because Peter Dinklage found the idea of Snow White offensive to little people because it was 7 dwarfs living in a cave and also being stupid. Because of the Peter Dinklage complaint, Disney opted not to hire actors to play the dwarfs and instead use CGI. But to Peter Dinklage and Disney being called out by other actors with dwarfism like Dylan Postel said it was the equivalent of blackface. Now Peter Dinklage has a new role as voicing the character of Dr. Dilliman in the Wicked movies, which is one of Universal's biggest investments ever, costing $350 million for both films. Wicked is a fan fiction spin-off of Wizard of Oz, which was one of the biggest employers of little people ever, hiring 124 little people and paying them $50 a week, which would be $900 a week in today's money. But making Wicked, there were no actual little people hired to play the Munchkins, and they actually just used shorter actors like Ethan Slater, who's 5'7". Because this, Peter Dinklage has been called out saying he cost dozens of little people work because they wanted to make him happy.
So Charles Peralto broke that down and basically showcasing that there are so many jobs that people with dwarfism can still have. My husband has been making me watch a whole bunch of older movies he claims are classics, like The Princess Bride, which he just made me watch, a very cringy ass movie.
As you wish.
Oh, my sweet Wesley, what have I done? Ow! Oh!
Then I see certain old movies where they had characters or creatures that were like regular sized people, or regular sized people couldn't play those specific creatures. And then they have the regular sized actors and then people who were the smaller actors, and dwarves could play those roles. And they'd be happy to take that role because it was unique to them. It's kind of one of those situations where it's kind of impossible for anybody else to do. And look, I understand that CGI has become a mainstay in modern media, but the Snow White movie is one of those movies where you could have literally had actual dwarves playing the role. You could put them in like makeup or make them look more like the actual characters. But, that would mean more people to pay and why give them jobs, am I right? They heard the voice of one successful dwarf who made it big taking these types of roles, and then he said, you know what, now that I'm like a super millionaire and super famous and stuff, now that I've made it to the top and I'm sitting on my throne as top daddy dwarf, yeah, come to think of it, I'm like the acceptable type of dwarf, so all those roles that got me here, they're like super offensive and no other dwarf should ever play them again. He laughed sardonically and asked what Hollywood was doing with their ass backwards actions, but we should all be asking him that question as well.
So please bring each other along with you.
How motivational. You failed to do that, bro. You didn't bring all the others with you. You were like, nope, this is where it ends right now. There's only room enough for one of us on this boat. Eat my boot heel.
Uh-oh, Richard.
And yes, Peter Dinklage is an amazing, phenomenal actor, but that has nothing to do with this. There are barely any people out there in his situation or who were in his situation when he began that can make it the way he did.
You're just like
Yes!
There are so many roles that they could play. And I have to look back at old movies to even see dwarves now. It was almost becoming somewhat like normal to see them when you look at the movies that existed in a specific space of time. It's like every 3 or 5 movies you'd see a dwarf. Could just be the sci-fi ones or ones I was watching where they use people with dwarfism for roles as creatures or whatnot, or costumes to make certain things come to life on screen, which I thought was really cool. But if I didn't have the old movies, honestly, dwarves would feel very rare. All the more reason to make it more believable that they're magical in a Snow White movie because you never see them. Maybe Disney doesn't know they exist and that's why they use CGI ones.
They're remaking the movie. They just got rid of the dwarfs. Okay,
but what do they call them?
Why would they get rid of the dwarves, though?
Magical creatures.
But they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures. You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it. The disability, like we're a disability group. You just erased that whole image. The argument should have been from Peter Dinklage. There's power of being on TV. There's power of television. And to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there. If the story is offensive, change the story. Don't change the characters.
Well, clearly, obviously, you guys are missing the point, Unplanned Podcast. Disney thinks dwarves are offensive. I mean, that's the only way that could make sense. All of that being said, more people in the dwarf community need to come out and have a word with Peter. I think that he should get the smoke for this too, but people are trying to make it seem as though it's not Disney's fault. And they're saying, oh, just blame Peter Dinklage. He's the one responsible for all of this. Last time I checked, Peter Dinklage was not Disney's overlord.
Buddy, not now. Can you please go back to the pit? I'll come visit you in a little while, okay?
I didn't know you had elves working here.
Talk about Game of Thrones. Dude played that like a freaking Vice. They took his voice and his voice alone as a representative for every single dwarf on the planet, and they made their decision to not cast any dwarves, and it wasn't because they didn't want to offend them. Honestly, it's simply because they just didn't want to, and Peter Dinklage gave them that easy reason. Because, you know, if they really cared, it wouldn't have mattered what he said. Damn. It's like this movie is trying to collectively piss off everybody, and when people are uniting against something, that's a very powerful thing. Even people who outright hate another group can at least put down their swords and come together, lick each other's faces in camaraderie over their shared hatred for the Snow White remake. Now, what's hilarious is that, to add insult to injury, the dwarves are out of a job, right? I'm not saying they can't get jobs anywhere else, but let's be honest. This would have been, you know, before Disney touched and cursed everything, one of the most iconic jobs for dwarves. But Tyrion, aka, you know him from Game of Thrones, Peter Dinklage over there, while he made sure to snatch the rug from under his own community, he got a role in Toxic Avenger, and apparently it's a reboot, and I think there was a 2023 version, he was in that one too. Stay getting his bag. Bro, dude, Peter Dinklage is like that one fish in the lake that sees his fellow fish eating crumbs from a big meal that he's scavenging, and then he gets like big mad and threatened by them. Instead of continuing to eat from his undersea carcass, he just turns around and starts gobbling up his fellow fish instead.
Jackweed, I get more action in a week than you've had your entire life. I've got houses in LA, Paris, and Vail. Each one of them with a 70-inch plasma screen. So I suggest you wipe that stupid smile off your face before I come over there and smack it off.
That's crazy. And I'm sorry, is he the only damn dwarf in Hollywood? I know that dwarves are a minority, but isn't that what Disney and Hollywood are trying to do? Like, pushing an overwhelming focus on minority representation? It's only the ones that they deem acceptable and that they want, right? It's not the redheads. It's not the Asians. It's not the Puerto Ricans. It's not the Native Americans. Unless, of course, those movies that come out once in a blue moon about them being hunted for their lands or oppressed. Oh well. And, like, I haven't missed the irony in this titular character's name, Toxic Avenger, since that's the role he failed at by pretending that he cared about the offense towards the dwarf community, only to be toxic himself in the name of avenging them for some weird reason they didn't ask for. That's why, I keep telling people this. Speak up. Don't let a small group of people or one person represent you. If someone in your community is saying something that you don't agree with, feel free to disagree with them, but speak up. You don't have to be mean, like everyone's trying to have a conversation with this, but no matter what group you belong to, people are not a monolith. Don't let them trick you into thinking otherwise. Don't let one person come out as your mouthpiece and say, yeah, we all feel this way. And then notice, it's always the people who are the elites who've already made it. You'll notice all of the artists or singer celebrities, they're married and have a mansion, have a guy with the money, and their submissive wives or whatnot, telling everybody out there, all the single ladies, and blah, 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 whatever. I don't need no man, while they're going to sleep in their mansions curled up next to their man. They're talking about liberation and how when men treat them wrong, they're just going to go to the club. But yet, in their lives, Beyonce, as beautiful as she is, still sitting with the same man who did you wrong all this time. But yet you're singing about being not irreplaceable and whatnot. I'm just saying, a lot of these celebrities, you look at their lives and they're the ones preaching at you who to vote for, what to buy, how to feel, when they do not live in the same world that you live in. All of these dwarves out there, there's probably not a lot of dwarves out there that have the amount of wealth that Peter Dinklage has. Yet he's sitting there talking about what's offensive and what jobs should be available for the many dwarves in his community that can barely get these types of jobs to begin with. Because apparently now their existence is offensive unless you look like Peter Dinklage, and we can only deal with like one dwarf at a time. It's so messed up.